So 1 Corinthians chapter 16, this of course is writing of Paul to a church that was filled with carnality. What happens here is these are the final exhortations that Paul is giving to Apollos and other men within the church that are in leadership here at Corinth. Apollos will be coming to them. He will be representing Paul as he visits this particular church of Corinth. And Paul writes this exhortation, and it's just a couple of short verses in 16. Verse 13. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong, let all that you do be done with love. Now, some of you with your Bibles, depending on your translation, that word brave, it could have quit like men written in it, in that particular place. In the original, that's what's written, quit like men, which I'll explain to you shortly. Now, this sermon I'm giving today is directed mainly at men. It's a sermon that will upset many people because of the way culture is today and the way that they define masculinity. So anyone who brings through biblical basis of what masculinity looks like, they will be labelled as those that teach a toxic masculinity. Now, toxic masculinity is anything that goes against the grain of what the culture says is the definition. And when we look at the culture today, we are seeing that there is a lot of men that have become very effeminate. Now, this has come into being. I preached a message going back a while now about feminism and how feminism has gone to an extreme now when it comes to equality, that we have women wanting to be men and men that are becoming women. That's the fibre of what it's caused. Femininity, as I taught back then, has caused many other avenues to open up when it comes to equality. Things that were unacceptable are now being acceptable, which are not acceptable when it comes to God and the way God designed men and women. Now, if I was to say to everybody here to give me a definition of masculinity, they'd probably be saying things like, well, a big, robust man, hairy man with a six-pack, and he's, rugged and curses and tells dirty jokes, and he goes around and he farts in public. You'd get all these different definitions of what it means to be a man. The reality is that masculinity is missing today. And I'm not defining it through the ways I just brought definitions just then. That is not what a man looks like. And especially when it comes to biblical masculinity. Now, one thing that really annoys me today, and I have been to these groups that ministers go to, leaders go to, where we are taught in our spiritual formation that as men, we need to be more vulnerable. Seriously? More vulnerable? So what they're raising now through the church are men that are very wimpy as men. And they are very wimpy when it comes to strong leadership. This is why we're seeing so many women behind pulpits in the church. And I don't blame the women, I blame the men. The men are not stepping up and being men. They're like the culture says, oh, go and get in touch with your feminine side. I don't have a feminine side. I am a man. I am not a woman. I have genitalia of a man. I was born a man. I am not a woman. And that's the way God designed it. I just want to put this in place. Do you know what? There's an actual word today, and it's a word that is femboy. Because of how effeminate men have become today. Goodness, I was down having a meal with Don at the club the other night, and this young man walked in, and the only reason I knew that he wasn't homosexual was he had his wife and baby with him. But when he spoke, he was so effeminate. He spoke like this. Instead of just being a man. This apparently is the new age style of man, where they talk with a lot of femininity in their voice. And it actually sickens me to the stomach when I see that. Grown men, and they're acting like women, and they're acting in a way where they are totally subjective to their wives. We see a world where everything is being redefined, and because of it we are seeing good being evil, evil being good. We are seeing women wanting to be men. That's not good. That's evil. And men wanting to be women. That's not good. That's evil. So let's establish that there is a man and there is a woman. We need to do that, especially for those that may be listening who are caught up in the culture of today and the defining that comes with it. And it's in Genesis chapter 1. This is all about creation. And in verse 26, chapter 1, God said this. He said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, listen, male and female. Now, one thing you have to understand is men have an XY chromosome. Women have an XX chromosome. Men don't have women's chromosomes. Women don't have men's chromosomes. If you are biologically born a man, you will always be biologically a man. Oh, you can refurbish the exterior, but that doesn't change the interior. You will always be a man. That was proven at the Olympics, wasn't it? When this transgender, this man that had become a woman, was boxing against women, and of course he won the gold medal. And that's because he is a man, a biological man. A man cannot become a woman, and a woman cannot become a man. They will always remain men and women the way God brought it into existence to be. It is God's design, not mine. And the man has different qualities and different attributes as opposed to women. Men are physically stronger. Would you not agree with that? There are certain leadership accountabilities that God gave men to do. He has called men to protect women, to look after women. Women are called to be feminine, and men like women who are feminine. I despise what I see today in women. They are walking around acting like men. I see them on the rugby league fields, the rugby union fields, and they're walking around like this. Instead of being in beautiful clothing and showing the way that God beautifully created them. They're tarnishing what God has created because of their want of equality. And they want to be a man for some reason. They're not content with their femininity. And men today have become so subordinate when it comes to their role as a father, as a husband, as a church leader. They're failing. They're failing because they're so effeminate. Now, when the Bible speaks about effeminacy, that's talking about homosexuals, that's talking about cross-dressers, that's talking about any man that acts like a woman. So it's a very immoral sin that we see everywhere in the world today. So you don't have to be gay to be effeminate. You can be effeminate without being gay or homosexual. But the problem is sometimes I've got to wait to see, and I've got to wait to see if some of these men that I speak with today are actually homosexual or whether they're straight. You know, I'm trying to determine sometimes which team they bat for. That's the reality of today. And it shouldn't be that way. When I was a boy growing up, my father taught me what it meant to be a man. He did. He taught me what it was to be a man. A man is not a wimpy, little effeminate character. A man is supposed to be someone that their wives can lean on. They're to be strong. They're to be courageous. But today, we see more women stronger and more courageous than many men. That's the truth. Masculinity is defined this way. It's as qualities and attributes regarded as characteristic of men. Do you hear that? That is characteristic of men, not women. Women are not supposed to be masculine. When we talk about masculinity, we're talking about a person's gender. Gender is a social construct and is one of the many ways we as humans make meaning and create social structures. And it should be the way that God designed it. Because when God designed it and he said, this is very good. This is very good. What I've created is very good. I've created man and I've created a woman out of man. That's what woman means, out of a man. And the woman was created to be the man's what? Helpmate. Today, you know, I don't understand why so many women want to be and want to have the equality of men. I don't understand that. I don't understand why they have to achieve to be as masculine as what a man is. I cannot for the life of me understand that. But you know what? When I look at a lot of the same-sex couples of today, especially within the males, you see that one takes an effeminate position and the other takes the more robust position in the relationship. And then when I look at women that are in homosexual or what we call lesbian relationships, you see the same thing. One takes the effeminate role and the other one takes a masculine role in the relationship. That's because deep down, they know the truth. That a man is supposed to be with a woman, and that's why they try to role play being a man within the relationship, or if it's a man and a man in a relationship, one takes the feminine position. That's the reality of it. That's the truth. They choose to suppress that truth. And that's what the devil wants them to do. Traits traditionally viewed as masculine in Western society include these attributes: strength, courage, independence, leadership, and assertiveness. I've got to say, I don't see many assertive men today. No wonder women are stepping to the forefront. Women have become dominant in many, many relationships. I see it all the time. Men should be taking up the role of leadership in the house, in the church. They should be taking their calling seriously as a man. And men need to step up. They really do today. But if we teach these attributes concerning men, they will label people like myself as one who teaches a toxic masculinity. I'm glad my father raised me to be a man. You know, my father taught me that you just had to suck it up and be a man. He didn't raise me to be an emotional wimp. He taught me to have strong values. He taught me that I was to protect females. That's what he taught me. And I will protect my wife. She is my wife. If any man insults my wife, they will deal with me, not my wife. Because I'm called to protect her. And protect her, I will. But many today, we see women protecting their men. I've seen it over and over again, where women are standing up for their husbands because their husbands won't even stand up for themselves, let alone anyone else. Elizabeth Elliot was a missionary woman. She was a godly woman. And she said this. She said, stand true. She's talking to men. She says, stand true to your calling to be a man. Real women, emphasis, real women will always be relieved and grateful when men are willing to be men. That's the problem today. Because men have become so effeminate and wimpy, women are taking all the leadership roles in every area of life. In the household, in the church, in the business world. We see women out there protecting men. Women on the front line, Stanley, fighting. They're where the men should be. The police force. When I joined the police force, women were only called out if you had to do a search of a female or someone had been sexually molested or raped. Outside of that, they stayed at the station. The men patrolled the streets. The men made the physical arrests. It's all changed now. Everywhere you look, women are in leadership. Police commissioners. Look around Australia, they're all women. We're about to possibly have a female president of America. Look where it's gone. Because men won't be men. Because men won't make a stand. Women made a stand right back in the suffragist period. And they did it for the right reasons. But now it's gone to an extreme. And because it's gone through an extreme, and because of the political correctness, because of the laws that are now out there, men are not being men. They're bowing down to women, and they're just taking the fruit from the woman. Oh boy, I'm sure I'll get some love letters after this message. Men are called to be examples. The Bible teaches that men are to lead. Men are to be strong. Men are to be courageous. Was Moses a wimp? Did he wear a dress? Did he talk like this? Come on, Joshua, let's go take the promised land. Did he talk like that? He was a man. Joshua was a man. And what did God say to him? Be courageous. He didn't say, be a doormat for women. He said, you be courageous. This is your calling. You go in there and take the promised land. You lead the men in there, and you will get everything I have promised you, but you be courageous. Noah. David. King David. He was a man after God's own heart. He was a man. He was a warrior. He was a poet. He could be a poet and a warrior. He could be a poet and be a man. Go to Kings. Go to 1 Kings. Chapter 2. Listen to David as he teaches his son something and gives instructions to Solomon, who would take over the reign. He said, now the days of David drew near that he should die. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. In other words, he was about to die. Listen to what he says to his son. He says, be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man. Prove yourself a man. What do we see today? Parents, fathers, agreeing with their wives to make their children non-binary so that they can choose their own sex when they grow up. Well, for goodness sake, that is so corrupt and that is so sick, what you're putting in that child's mind. You should be saying to that child, if he's born a male, you are to grow up and be a man. You are to be strong. You are to be courageous. You are to be someone that a woman can look up to, that can put her trust in, that can rely on, that you're going to protect her. Job, talk about someone who had to suck it up. Job couldn't be a precious little China doll, could he? He went through every hardship there was in life. But you know what? When he started whinging, when he started complaining to God, what did God say to him? He said this, prepare yourself like a man. In other words, don't be a wimp. Stop whinging. Stop being wimpy. Suck it up, China. Suck it up. Be a man. Prove to me you're a man, Job. Show me you're a man of faith and courage. That you're a man of strong resolve. And of course, Jesus. You know, Jesus is so unfairly defined in the world. How many times do we see paintings of Jesus, or we see pictures of Jesus where he looks very feminine? Do you know, Jesus is the greatest example when it comes to a man and masculinity. I just want to read to you a short verse out of the Gospel of Luke, found in chapter 9, verse 51, which a lot of people don't sort of look at when it comes to Jesus. And this is why you get a false concept, because everyone loves to define Jesus as this gentle, meek man. I'm going to show you who Jesus is. And Jesus is a man. He's a man's man. He's a great example. Now it came to pass, now this is coming towards the time of his crucifixion, his arrest, his crucifixion. Listen to what it says. Now it came to pass when the time had come for him to be received up, in other words, to die, listen to this, that he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. He was no coward, not my Jesus. He was strong, he was courageous, he was filled with integrity. He was a strong example to all his disciples. You know, Jesus showed us when it come to the protection of his Father's house, what did he do? Did he turn a blind eye? Did he call his mother Mary to come and deal with it? No. What did he do? He proved himself a man, a strong-willed man, a man of God. And this was his Father's house that was being defiled. So what did he do? He went in there by himself, started turning over tables, started whipping them, getting them out of there. This was a man's man. This was a man who was courageous. He didn't go in and go, oh, would you mind? He said, get out! This house, my Father's house, is a house of prayer. Get out! You defile my Father's house. He defended his Father. What about the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees? All those that could have taken his life. Did he ever back down? Did he ever back down? No! He would confront them about their sin. He was a man. He went forward and he said, woe, you Pharisee hypocrites! Mind you, everything that Jesus did, he did out of love. But love doesn't mean that you are to be oppressed as a man. He set a great example to his disciples. He had a great resolve, Jesus. He faced every hardship there was to face as a man. Did he let it bring him down? Never. Never did my Jesus let anything in life oppress him or suppress him in his mission. Jesus, when I read that out of Luke, knowing that he was going to face the most harshest death, did he run and hide when it was time to face that? No, he steadfastly set his face to Jerusalem. And he walked in there. He came down the Mountain of Olives. When they brought the rideable colt to him, he got on it and he rode in triumph. Because why? Why did he ride with triumph? Because he knew this was his crowning glory that was going to happen in Jerusalem. He was not wimpy. He went into Jerusalem. He faced the enemy. They arrested him, an innocent man. But because of his resolve, because he was strong, because he was a strong man of faith, filled with masculinity, he could stand there, and he took everything they could throw at him. They did everything they could to break him. Could they break him? No. My Jesus is a strong Jesus. My Jesus is courageous. My Jesus was a true leader of men. My Jesus is my example of manliness. He was brave. He quitted himself a man. He would go and take that scourging that would have killed most men. And then they put the beam across his shoulders and made him walk to his death. And every time he fell, what did he do? He got back up again. That's what a real man does. When he's knocked down, he gets back up again. Have I had many times in my life where I've been knocked down? Yes, I have. But have I ended up getting back up again? Yes, I have. When we look at Jesus, we see true manhood. That would carry over to his disciples who would become his apostles, bar Judas of Iscariot. Because of his example, when they were filled with the Holy Spirit and they saw the risen Christ, what happened to them? They started to what? Prove themselves as men. They took up their rightful role and they followed Jesus. If you're going to follow Jesus as a man, you're going to be a man. With all manly traits. Masculinity is defined beautifully through the lives of many men within the Bible. Those I've named already, and there's others I didn't, such as Samson, Samuel, the prophets, the apostles of Christ. I can go on through history. Martin Luther, I can keep going on in history. Thomas Aquinas, Irenaeus, Tertullian. All these men were courageous. They were strong men of faith. And God used them mightily. God is not going to use wimpy, effeminate men that wear dresses instead of trousers. The pulpit needs strong men behind them who are not afraid to teach the whole counsel of God, who are not afraid to teach the proper order of things according to God when it comes to males and females. Am I a misogynist? No, I'm not. Do I love my wife? Yes, I do. Do I place her above rubies? Yes, I do, even though I don't show it all the time because of my sinfulness, but I want to. She's precious. She's feminine. She doesn't need to act like a boy. She doesn't need to show her masculinity. I treasure her for the way God created her. And women should be proud of their femininity. Not ashamed of it and want to become like a man. You read it, the attributes here that Paul gives in his final exhortation to the church of Corinth. You look at them. Here's all the attributes that Paul's talking about. He's saying this to Apollos and to all those that were followers of Paul that became his disciples. First thing he says is, watch. Watch. In other words, be alert. Be vigilant. Take responsibility of your calling as a man. Be alert. You're the one that God keeps accountable for your household and how your household is run. That's what you're called to do as men. Take leadership of your households. Love your wives as Christ loved the church. Place them above rubies. But in that, you're not to subject to your wife. Your wife's to subject to you. And she will subject to you if you are a man who is strong, courageous, brave, and filled with the faith of God. He says, stand fast in the faith. In other words, have a mature stability. In other words, men, it's time to grow up. You're no longer children. You're to stand fast in the faith. Paul, you've only got to turn back a few pages. He says this when he's addressing the church at Corinth in 1 Corinthians 13, that great love chapter. He says this when you get to verse 11, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, he didn't become a woman. He didn't become effeminate. He became a man. I put away childish things. I meet lots of men that are still children. And I'm talking about within the church. They're wimpy, they're effeminate, and their wives are therefore domineering. But that's because they're allowing that. They're allowing it. It shouldn't be that way, but it's that way because of their character. They haven't proved themselves to be men. They're little children who want their wives to become their mummies. Well, they need to let go. They're not on the breast milk anymore. It's time to let go and become a man. That's the reality. That's the truth. Paul goes on and he says this, be brave, or as some of you have, quit yourselves like men. Which means to have a manly or a brave way about you. In other words, when he says quit, he's saying acquit yourselves. This is where we get the word acquit. Acquit yourselves. In other words, to perform or act. You are to prove yourself to be a man, so act like a man. That's what he's saying. Act like a man. Don't run around with pink shirts and fancy hairdos and talk like you're gay. Talk like you're a homosexual. For goodness sake, stop and be a man. Take up your role in society. Teach your son what it means to be masculine. Because they're not being taught at a tender age, what's happening? Because culture says that females can be equal as males, they're being raised to be subjective to females and going against the very design of God. I taught my sons that they had to be real men. I didn't give them Barbie dolls to play with, like many parents do today with young males. I didn't let them wheel prams around. They were taught to be masculine, to be men. They were taught that being a male, they would one day meet a female and form a relationship. Yet today, what's happening? Parents are allowing our children's minds to be totally corrupted concerning their gender, concerning their call in life. And therefore they question their gender. So quit yourself like a man. Act like a man, says Paul. Warren Worsby said it was a call to courageous manliness at an hour when mature leadership was needed. I'm not the only one that believes that men should be masculine. There are many other good biblical scholars who believe men are to be masculine, not effeminate. That men should be leading the way and being the examples for their wives and their children. Paul goes on, he says, be strong. In other words, be a rock. Be a rock for your wife and children. Someone they can lean on to guard and lead them through the hard times, the troubled times. Men that are an example of manliness, setting the truth to their sons, will bring normality back to the design of God for society. Society is being robbed of masculinity. There is nothing more that the devil loves than to see Jezebel sitting on the throne. I'm not calling all women Jezebel, by the way. But I hope you understand how I'm using that allegorically. Theodore Roosevelt, he said this: we do not admire the man of timid peace. We admire the man who embodies victorious effort, the man who never wrongs his neighbours, who is prompt to help a friend. But this is the real man that we admire. He is the one that has virile qualities necessary to win in the stern strife of actual life. Society has been robbed. That's the reality. The world has been redefined through sin. The church is the one that needs to stand up and speak the truth, and is to call all men to account, especially within the church. There are too many women running the church. Men need to stand up and take back their rightful position in the church. Men are to show strong leadership to the congregation. And it's lacking because men are not being virile. They're not being masculine in any way. And out of this, Paul says, and it's all done with love. So even this message I'm preaching, it's done out of love. I love this world that I live in. I think it's a travesty to see where it's gone. It's gone so far away from the design of God that it saddens me deeply. When I see men, like I did the other night, talking the way they do and dressing the way they dress and acting very effeminate, it just makes me sad. If a woman is leading a household, it's because the man is not showing masculinity. That's the truth. That's the truth. God's design is done intentionally. And all men will give an account before God for the examples they've set, for the way that they've cowered in their lives, allowing women to fight on their behalf. That sickens me. To think there's women going to the front lines in wars, that the men are letting them. Well, shame. That's shameful. Women being put in the front line where all the danger is. Seriously? Men should be ashamed of themselves. Really should. And then to allow women to take all the spiritual accountability in the church. Well, shame on men. Shame on men. Because let me tell you, if you're not going to be a man and you're not going to take up your rightful position in life and fulfill what God has called you to do, guess what? He will use a woman. But shame on you. We need to get back to God's design, and it's all done through love. All done through love. Masculinity has tenderness, gentleness, but it is not effeminate. Western society needs men to be men and women to be women. The role reversal we see today is destroying the God-designed order for a natural and normal society. This politically correct over-exaggeration is causing men to be feminine and women to be masculine, confusing our children concerning their sexual orientation and purpose in life, leading them to all sorts of deviant lifestyles. Christian men everywhere, it starts with you. You set the standard. God's standard. Be strong and prove yourself a man, as David told Solomon. And what Solomon ended up doing? Came under the influence of women, and what happened to Solomon? His life was shortened because of it. It's a stern warning to all men. Starts with us, so God's standards are, be strong therefore and prove yourself a man. He created you a man to be a man, so lead the way as Jesus led. Show the world that masculinity, male masculinity, and God's design is alive today. And it starts here in the household of God. So please, take seriously God's word and the way that God has created you. He hasn't created you so that you can deform yourself and become an opposite gender to the way He's created you. That is abhorrent, that is sinful, and it's going to take you to hell. Are homosexuals allowed in the church? Yes. Cross-dressers? Yes. Why are they allowed in the church? Because they're sinners the same as everyone else. But guess what? God wants to take them. He wants to show them the lie in which they're living, the deception under which they're being controlled, and He will deliver them from that atrocity. The same as He delivers us all from all sin. There is no sin He can't be delivered from. And he can take the lie of one's gender out of one's head and get them back to the way they were created and be satisfied and content in that. So I just pray that the Lord does do a work in this world when it comes to men taking up their rightful position, taking up the accountability that God has called them to do. So may God bless his word this day. In Jesus' name.